This story is titled, Accidentally Discovered My Fiancée's Affair. She laughed about needing new experience while my bros supported her. I simply walked away. I woke up one morning to find my phone blowing up. 32 missed calls. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. All the signs were scattered like breadcrumbs throughout our relationship, but I was too trusting to piece them together. I had been with my girlfriend Ashley for 3 years. We had built what I thought was a solid relationship, and I always gave her the benefit of the doubt when things seemed off. That's what you do when you love someone, right? At least that's what I kept telling myself. It started with small things that I brushed aside. Ashley began working late more often, but that wasn't unusual during busy times at her consulting job. Then I noticed a new perfume I didn't recognize appearing in our bathroom. Strange clothes started showing up in our closet that I'd never seen her wear. Most tellingly, her phone suddenly became this sacred object, never more than an arm's length away from her at any given time. I've never been the jealous type. I've always believed in giving my partners space and trust. But something felt really off about this situation. She'd physically pull away when I tried to hug her from behind while she was texting. She was constantly stepping out of the room to take calls, dismissing my curious glances with a casual, just work stuff when she returned. And suddenly there were constant girls' nights with people I'd never heard of before. Friends whose names had never come up in 3 years of dating. Last Tuesday changed everything. I was folding laundry like I usually do on Tuesdays when her phone lit up on the coffee table. A message preview popped up from someone named Marcus that read, "Miss you already. Last night was..." The rest got cut off by the notification preview limit. I felt my stomach drop instantly. I didn't want to be that guy who snoops through his partner's phone, but at this point, the universe was basically screaming at me to wake up. Later that night, I decided to be direct rather than playing detective. I found her in the kitchen, making some fancy protein shake like nothing was wrong in our world. The blender noise was filling our Chicago apartment, and I leaned against the doorframe watching her for a moment. When she finally turned it off, I asked simply, "Who's Marcus?" Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. Her shoulders tensed up immediately, and then she did something I never expected. She smiled. But it wasn't her usual warm smile that I had fallen in love with. This was cold and almost triumphant, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "I was wondering when you'd finally catch on, David," she said casually, taking a sip from her glass like she was enjoying this confrontation. "Marcus is my boss." She paused for dramatic effect before adding, "And yes, I've been sleeping with him for the past 2 months. The casual way she said it felt like a slap across my face. There was no guilt in her voice, no shame in her expression, just pure pride radiating from her as she confessed to betraying our 3-year relationship. "I needed a real man," she continued, still smirking while sipping her drink like we were having a casual conversation about the weather. "Someone who knows what he wants and goes for it. Not someone who spends his weekends playing Valorant with Thomas or watching those stupid indie films you love so much." I stood there processing her words, letting the reality of our 3 years together sink in. This was how she really saw me, as someone lesser, someone not worth basic respect or honesty. Through the shock, I felt something else rising within me. It wasn't anger, surprisingly. Instead, a strange sense of clarity washed over me, like fog clearing from my mind. "Does Rebecca know?" I asked, thinking of our mutual friend who had introduced us at her birthday party 3 years ago. "Oh, she's known for weeks," Ashley laughed, seemingly enjoying my discomfort. "Most of our friends know. They understand Marcus can actually provide a future, not just dreams and excuses." That hit harder than the cheating admission. These people we'd shared everything with, birthdays, holidays, countless dinner parties at our apartment, had all been watching this happen behind my back. They were probably laughing at me, the oblivious boyfriend who couldn't see what was right in front of him. I pulled out my phone and opened the group chat with Thomas and Rebecca, my fingers slightly trembling as I typed, "Is this true? You all knew?" Thomas responded instantly, "Bro, you're great, but Ashley deserves someone more established. Don't take it personally." Rebecca chimed in seconds later. "We didn't want to hurt you, but maybe this is the wake-up call you need." I looked up from my phone to find Ashley still watching me, that same smirk playing on her lips. She was waiting for the explosion, the drama, the scene she could tell everyone about later. I could almost hear her future retelling. Poor immature David losing his cool when he found out. Instead, I smiled. It was a real, genuine smile that caught her completely off guard. Without saying another word, I walked to our bedroom and pulled out my emergency bag that I always kept packed for weekend hiking trips. I grabbed my laptop and keys, moving with a calm purpose that seemed to confuse her. I passed through the kitchen again where Ashley was still standing, her smirk finally faltering as she watched me heading toward the door. "Where are you going?" she demanded, her voice losing its confident edge. "Out," I replied simply. I paused at the door and added, "And Ashley, keep the apartment. I'm sure Marcus can help with the rent." I heard her start to say something as I closed the door behind me, but I didn't stop to listen. My phone was already buzzing nonstop with messages. Probably our so-called friends trying to explain themselves. But I didn't care to read them. I drove away into the night, the lights of our neighborhood fading in my rearview mirror. Once I hit the highway, I turned my phone off completely, silencing the constant vibrations. As the miles stretched between me and what used to be my life, I felt something unexpected washing over me. Pure, unadulterated relief. It was as if I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't even recognized until it was suddenly lifted from my shoulders. Sometimes losing everything shows you exactly what you never had. The relationship I thought was solid, the friends I believed were loyal, none of it had been real. The realization was both painful and liberating at the same time. I had no idea where I was going, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was heading in the right direction. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least it was my own path to choose. 1 week later, I found myself staying at a small motel on the outskirts of town. It wasn't glamorous by any means, but it was clean and quiet. Exactly what I needed. The owner's name was Frank, a decent old guy with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. He even knocked $20 off the weekly rate when he heard a simplified version of my story. Some people still have decency, it seems. After 2 days of complete digital silence, I finally turned my phone back on. The flood of notifications hit me like a tidal wave. 32 missed calls, 47 text messages. Most were from Ashley with a good number from Thomas and Rebecca, plus a few from numbers I didn't even recognize. But what really caught my attention was the storm of social media notifications. Ashley had been busy in my absence. Really busy. I checked her Instagram story, curious to see what narrative she was spinning, and barely recognized the story she was telling. According to her carefully crafted posts, I was a controlling, jealous boyfriend who monitored her every move. She claimed I had emotionally manipulated her for years, isolated her from friends, and thrown a violent tantrum when she stood up for herself. The comments section was filled with hundreds of sympathetic responses, including ones from people I had thought were my friends. The crown jewel of her performance was a tearful video claiming financial abuse. She sobbed to her audience about how I made her split all bills 50/50ths while hoarding my money. This was particularly rich coming from her, considering she earned more than me, and she was the one who had insisted on that arrangement in the first place. I remembered her exact words. "I'm a modern woman, David. I don't need a man to pay my way." While I was processing this character assassination, I got a text from Olivia, a coworker I'd known for years. "Hey, you might want to check your email. Something's going around the office about you." I opened my company email with a sense of dread and found a company-wide message about creating a safe workplace environment with thinly veiled references to concerning behaviors. No names were mentioned, but the timing wasn't exactly subtle. I should have been angry. I should have fought back, posted my side of the story, defended myself against these blatant lies. Instead, I just felt curious. I wondered how far she would take this elaborate deception. Pretty far, as it turns out. Yesterday, I stopped at my local cafe, the one with the amazing cold brew that got me through countless deadlines. This place should have been safe territory. Ashley always hated their coffee, claiming it was too acidic for her refined palate. Wrong again. The barista who had always been friendly to me, who used to remember my order and occasionally throw in a free pastry, now gave me a look like I was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. I found out later that Ashley had become a regular there, sharing her survival story with anyone who would listen, painting herself as the brave woman who escaped her controlling boyfriend. But here's where it gets interesting. While picking up some clothes from our storage unit, I ran into Nicole, Ashley's supposed best friend. She looked nervous when she saw me, glancing around as if she was afraid of being seen with me. "You need to be careful," she whispered, her eyes darting to check if anyone was watching us. "Marcus isn't just her boss. His wife is connected. Like, really connected. And Ashley's been telling her that you're unstable, dangerous even." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, confused by her sudden concern after she had likely been supportive of Ashley's lies. Nicole's eyes darted around again before she leaned closer. Because this isn't the first time. Before you, there was another guy at work. Ashley and Marcus. They did the same thing to him. He ended up leaving town. That conversation changed everything. I spent that night digging through legal records, social media profiles, anything I could find. The previous guy existed. Ryan something. He had completely disappeared from social media around the time Ashley started at the company. It was like he'd vanished into thin air, his digital footprint wiped clean except for a few tagged photos on mutual acquaintances' profiles. The next morning, I got a call from our landlord. Ashley had tried to remove my name from the lease, claiming I had abandoned the property. When that didn't work, she told him I'd been threatening her. Fortunately, he called to warn me. His sister had gone through something similar years ago, and he recognized the warning signs. Then the real kicker hit. I received a message request on Instagram from an account I didn't recognize. The profile picture showed a woman in her 40s, elegant and composed, wearing expensive jewelry that probably cost more than my car. The message was simple. I believe we need to talk about my husband and your girlfriend. Coffee tomorrow? It was signed Mrs. Marcus. I agreed to meet her. Something told me that Ashley's real man story was about to get a lot more complicated. Funny thing is, watching Ashley spin this web of lies, seeing our friends choose sides based on nothing but her word. It was actually liberating in a way. Every nasty post, every fake tear, every manipulated story just confirmed what I already knew. I wasn't losing anything worth keeping. 2 weeks later, I can confirm that coffee meeting with Mrs. Marcus was a complete game changer. Turns out she had been gathering evidence for months, not just about Ashley and her husband, but about a whole pattern of behavior at the company. Remember how Nicole mentioned a guy who left town? Well, according to Mrs. Marcus, he wasn't the first. Mrs. Marcus had everything documented with meticulous detail. She outlined at least 3 similar situations over the past 5 years. Young employees getting involved with her husband, then helping push out anyone who might expose their relationship. It was a systematic pattern of workplace manipulation and intimidation. She showed me texts, emails, expense reports that had been falsified, and even security footage from the company parking garage showing Ashley and Marcus together at times when they'd both claimed to be working late on separate projects. Mrs. Marcus had been building a case silently for months, but she wanted one final piece to complete her collection: public exposure. Sometimes, she told me as she stirred her coffee thoughtfully, the best revenge is letting people show their true colors. She had a plan, and it centered around the annual company party scheduled for the following weekend. I wasn't planning to attend, why would I? But Mrs. Marcus had other ideas. She wanted me there, not to cause a scene, but simply to be a catalyst for what she had orchestrated. Against my better judgment, I showed up to the party at a fancy downtown hotel, fashionably late and wearing the best suit I owned. The reactions when I walked in were absolutely priceless. Ashley nearly dropped her drink mid-sip, and Marcus's face transitioned from red to white so quickly I thought he might pass out on the spot. The best part? I didn't have to do anything. Rebecca approached first, clearly tipsy from the open bar, her words slurring slightly. "You've got some nerve showing up here," she said loudly, ensuring nearby groups could hear. "After everything you put Ashley through." I just smiled at her calmly. "Everything I put her through? That's interesting. Tell me more." That's when Olivia stepped in. Remember her? My co-worker who had warned me about the office rumors? Turns out she had been collecting evidence too. Screenshots of Ashley bragging about her conquest in company chat groups, recordings of her planning her story with Marcus, making sure their narratives aligned perfectly. "Actually," Olivia announced, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet corner of the room, "I think we'd all like to hear the real story." The next hour was like watching dominoes fall in perfect sequence. Mrs. Marcus timed her entrance perfectly, tablet in hand, just as the projector accidentally started playing a slideshow of incriminating messages and photos. Ashley made increasingly desperate attempts to maintain control of her narrative, but the evidence was overwhelming. The real show came from Thomas, though. Good old bros before hoes. Thomas, except when said hoe might advance his career, apparently. I watched with a strange sense of detachment as he filmed everything on his phone, positioning himself strategically around the room. I later found out he had been planning to show the footage to Marcus later to prove his loyalty or something equally pathetic. Instead, he ended up capturing Ashley's complete meltdown in 4K resolution. "You think you're so clever!" she screamed at me, mascara starting to run down her cheeks. You and that bitter old woman, trying to ruin everything I've built. Marcus loves me. We're going to have a life together. That's when Mrs. Marcus dropped the final bomb. Divorce papers, already filed with the court. Turns out Marcus had been promising Ashley the same future he had promised those other employees. It was the same script, just with a different actress. Ashley's face as she realized that her real man had been playing her all along was a study in devastation. The best part? I barely said a word through all of this. I just watched as years of manipulation and lies unraveled in real time, their elaborate house of cards collapsing under the weight of truth. Nicole, who had been quiet all evening, hovering at the edges of the crowd, finally spoke up when the room had fallen into stunned silence. I helped her, she admitted, her voice small but clear. I helped her destroy Ryan's reputation. I can't do it again. The confession seemed to physically drain her, as though voicing her complicity had removed some crucial support that had been keeping her upright. By midnight, the party was effectively over. Ashley stormed out with mascara streaking down her face, her carefully constructed image in tatters. Marcus was locked in his office with the HR director, no doubt trying to salvage what was left of his career. Those friends who had been so quick to believe Ashley's stories couldn't look me in the eye as they slipped out one by one. As I was leaving, Mrs. Marcus caught my arm by the elevator. Thank you, she said with genuine warmth in her eyes, for being the one who didn't run. I drove back to my motel feeling strangely peaceful, like I'd finally closed a chapter that had been left hanging. Frank was still up watching late-night TV in the office when I walked in. He took one look at my face and grinned knowingly. Good night? He asked, muting a commercial. You could say that, I replied, unable to stop a small smile from forming. The next morning, I woke to find my phone blowing up again, but with a different tone this time. My inbox was flooded with apologies and explanations, people claiming they never really believed Ashley's stories in the first place. I even got a message from Ryan, the guy who had left town. He had been following everything through mutual connections, watching the drama unfold from a safe distance. Sometimes karma doesn't need our help. It just needs an audience. The aftermath of the company party hit harder than expected. Within 48 hours, both Marcus and Ashley were asked to resign from their positions, but that was just the beginning of their troubles. Remember those documents Mrs. Marcus had collected? There was more. Much more. She had meticulously compiled every expense report Marcus had falsified to cover his business dinners with Ashley, every email where they had plotted against other employees, and every manipulated performance review they had used to push people out. It was a comprehensive paper trail of workplace harassment and misconduct. She handed it all to the board of directors, and the company's legal team moved fast. Really fast. They were less concerned about the affairs themselves, and more worried about the pattern of workplace harassment and financial misconduct that could expose them to serious liability. Both Marcus and Ashley were now facing civil lawsuits from the company, trying to recover misappropriated funds and damages. The situation got even more interesting when Ryan came back. He didn't just return with vague accusations. He brought receipts, both literal and figurative. Turns out he had documented everything before leaving, including the smear campaign that Ashley and Marcus had orchestrated against him. He just hadn't known what to do with all that evidence until now, when he saw an opportunity for justice. Mrs. Marcus introduced him to her lawyer, and 3 days later, he filed his own lawsuit against both Marcus and the company for wrongful termination and defamation. Then something beautiful happened. Other former employees started coming forward, each with their own stories and their own evidence. What had started as one scandal quickly became an avalanche, exposing years of toxic behavior that had been swept under the rug. Ashley tried getting ahead of the narrative once more. She posted a tearful video on her Instagram, claiming she was the real victim, manipulated by Marcus, and now being persecuted by a vengeful wife and jealous ex. The performance was Oscar-worthy, complete with perfectly timed voice breaks and strategically wiped tears. That's when Nicole finally grew a spine. She posted screenshots of their private chats, ones where Ashley had bragged about her conquests, planned how to destroy people's reputations, and mockingly referred to her victims as collateral damage in her career advancement strategy. The screenshots spread like wildfire, completely undermining Ashley's victim narrative. Last week, Ashley showed up at my motel. Frank called me at work, sounding both amused and concerned. "That girl you told me about? She's making quite a scene in the parking lot," he said, the sound of raised voices audible in the background. I took my time driving back, stopping for coffee on the way. When I arrived, I found her sitting on the hood of my car, mascara streaked down her face, clutching a manila envelope like it contained state secrets. "I have dirt on everyone," she said, trying to sound threatening despite her shaking voice. "If you don't help me stop this, I'll release it all." I just laughed at her desperate attempt at blackmail. "Go ahead," I told her, feeling strangely calm. "Burn every bridge you have left. See how that works out for you." She threw the envelope at me in frustration, and I caught it before it hit the ground. Inside were photos, screenshots, and private messages, ammunition she had collected over years of manipulating people. It was her insurance policy, carefully curated evidence she could use to control or destroy anyone who crossed her. I took pictures of every single page while she watched, her expression shifting from anger to confusion to fear. Then I handed the envelope back to her. "Release whatever you want," I said, "but first, look at where your previous schemes got you." The thing about people like Ashley is they can't stand when their own weapons are turned against them. In a fit of rage, she tore up the envelope right there in the parking lot, shredding her carefully collected leverage into confetti. She was screaming about how we'd all regret this, how she was the real victim in all of this. Someone in a neighboring room recorded her tantrum on their phone, and the video was all over social media within hours, further undermining her already crumbling credibility. The final blow came yesterday. Mrs. Marcus's divorce was finalized, and she got everything: the house, the cars, most of their assets. Marcus's golden parachute from the company was gone, spent on legal fees for the multiple lawsuits he now faced. His reputation was completely destroyed, and his future career prospects. Let's just say Google is not his friend anymore. Anyone searching his name would find pages of articles about the scandal, court documents, and social media discussions about his misconduct. As for Ashley, last I heard she's moving back in with her parents in a different state. Her social media has gone dark. No more tearful videos, no more playing the victim. Those friends who sided with her are dealing with their own fallout. It turns out backing the wrong horse has consequences, especially when the evidence against them becomes public. Thomas tried apologizing yesterday. He sent a long message about how he should have been a better friend, how he regretted letting status and connections cloud his judgment. I replied with a screenshot of his old messages supporting Ashley and encouraging others to believe her lies. He blocked me immediately. Coward. Rebecca is doing damage control too. She's worried that those screenshots Ashley kept might affect her own career. I almost feel bad for her. Almost. As for me, I just signed a lease on a new apartment in a different part of the city. I got a promotion at work. Turns out my boss had been impressed with my professionalism throughout the whole ordeal. It's funny how removing toxic people from your life improves everything around you. I'm even seeing someone new, a woman I met through Olivia. We're taking it slow, doing it right. After what I've been through, I've learned that solid foundations matter. The best revenge isn't plotting or scheming, it's living well and letting people destroy themselves with their own bad decisions. But I won't lie, watching it all burn has been pretty satisfying too.